Let me turn to you, Minister Jaishankar. Pax Americana, as Prime Minister Harper was alluding to, was perhaps that time when a semblance of a rules-based order existed, and it was because it was based on certain defined and rigid relationships. Is that the only way for the world in the future? Would we eventually have to arrive at a state where you would have a club with the rules and with the articles of charter of association?
No. No meaning, I think, like everything else, it had its moment or period in history, and history moved on, and the global order moves on. And I think what Prime Minister Harper also suggested is, for long periods of history, you had limited order or a kind of a non-orders at times. So what we may well, one day we may well say that what we saw after 1945 was a very unusual period of global politics. But having said that, why is it not easily extrapolatable in a way? Look, today the divides are really deep, okay? And the architecture at a certain level is really frozen, it's rigid. Okay. The guys at the top are not making space. There's a big push from the middle, upper middle, there's a push from the bottom, upper bottom. So you actually are moving more and more into an era where people say, I'm never going to get everybody in this room to agree to work together. So I'll go to that sofa, find those 5, 6 nice people who agree with me, and we will proceed to work on what we want to work on. And, I was doing some research on the Quad, and then I came on a very interesting number. I tried to figure out in the last 10 years, how many of these small groupings India had joined. Last 10 years. I could discover 36 in different domains, okay, from security, maritime to economic, trade, energy. So my sense is we are moving to a much sort of looser order where there isn't a CPU, there isn't a kind of
a diktat from a...
There isn't a rigidity to it. And that's part of what you yourself said. I mean, you use the word middle power, new power. So when you have more variables, more access, less overarching discipline, you will get to a very, very different situation.
You just mentioned get people in the room. Now, look, there are some in this part of the world who see you getting into many rooms with President Putin, with Macron, with everyone in the Middle East. So I mean, that was Meghan's hidden complaint there, that you speak to everyone, and I think that's what Prince Faisal mentioned as well. So the serious question to you here is that is it important to have these hubs where different groupings could actually try and find solutions that may be optimal for all of us?
Yes. I would give you the example of G20. What we had, and I'm sure you would bear with me here, we had essentially about 10 or 11 members who had very strong views of a certain kind. So you had the G7, Korea, Australia, EU, etc. Then you had Russia at the other extreme. And on many issues, China was very supportive of Russia. And then you had countries like us out there in the middle. Okay. And if you look really I mean, it was less apparent in Bali, certainly in the Delhi G20 summit. I think when we were to eventually get everybody around the table and find some kind of common ground. And the common ground was not just on geopolitical, it wasn't just an Ukraine debate, There were big debates about the digital public infrastructure, whether in fact G20 should be endorsing it at all, or a debate whether we should be open about the fact that there's been an enormous regression in achieving SDG goals, or the fact that unless there is more credible funding from international financial institutions, this talk about climate action is bogus. So in a lot of this, you actually had those 6, 7 countries who worked together, supported each other, did the bridging role. I mean, obviously, as we were the hosts, we had a lead in that process. So I'm citing that to you as just one example. But I do think there will be, I mean, if you pick a field, I can show you why there's a credible case for multiple combinations. I mean, we've, again, at the G20, one of the big achievements was the India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor. And that involved India, Saudi Arabia, Emirates, and a bunch of European countries, and of course the United States. But at the same time, the nature of life and politics being what it is, you're going to have other corridors. So we have an international north-south transport corridor as well, I mean, which involves Iran, Azerbaijan, Russia, and somebody else up there. So the point I'm making is the idea that there is one truth, there is one way, there is one solution. That era is over. The world is returning to its natural diversity. If there are 290 whatever countries in the world, I mean, you cannot impose a single thought or a single sort of discipline on them. I think that the natural world was far more consultative and diverse. We are returning to where we should have a long time ago.
Prince Faisal, I could see you nodding. Do you want to come in on this?
I mean, I'm nodding because I agree. I agree on, first of all, the last point, which is that it is probably the natural order if you look at the broad sweep of history. But I also agree that, and I think that's what Jaishankar was saying, that in the end, what will drive us, or what should drive us, is the search for a win-win environment where everybody can move forward and everybody's interests can be taken into account. I think one of the challenges with the previous order, with the unipolar order, was that the interests of some were always prioritized over the interests of others, and part of that was because of where we were individually in our developmental journeys. But as we move forward, countries like India, countries like the Kingdom and others, where we now have legitimate aspirations to be part of the first world or whatever you want to call it, then there's a necessity to build those partnerships and build those conversations in a way that allows everybody to partake in the interests of the future. And we won't achieve the big challenge, addressing the big challenges without cooperation. And that cooperation will more likely come from a drive by those middle powers, or whatever you call them, the aspiring nations that are moving into the future, like the Kingdom, like India and others, who will force the conversation into the direction of cooperation. And the digital divide or the digital spectrum is one of those areas, because obviously we are investing heavily in advanced technologies, including AI. And we are very, very interested in making sure that the conversation goes in a direction where there's an equal playing field, where we avoid that eventuality that you alluded to, that there is a capture through regulatory frameworks or other mechanisms in certain spaces. So I think for the vast majority of the population of the planet, this new dynamic actually will end up being beneficial because it will be a leveler and make sure that prosperity goes in a more equal way throughout the world.
Thank you, Prince Faisal. But let me remind you that you are also noticed in many rooms. I'm just telling you, like the foreign minister here. Ms. Vestager, you wanted to come in. I could see you.
No, it's just, you know, the thing that worries me about this talk about the natural order is that in the natural order, the strongest always win. So I would ask for a more sort of cultural order. Because we cannot have, well, it's, first of all, it's not order. It's just the strongest who flexes the muscle, and there we are. What would be, in my view, ideal is to see how can we forge a path where it's the priority for every nation state to increase the welfare of citizens, coming from the starting point that it's the integrity and the dignity of every person that is the source of legitimacy. And that can be done in many different ways, and that can be done by tiny states and big nations. My point is to say that we need to find a way as to how can we cooperate in different functions. Because if we do not solve climate change, we're in for much bigger problems than what we have right now. And if we do not use technology as an equalizer in doing so, we will not be successful. I simply do not think that it is possible. Because then that natural disorder of the strongest have the biggest might will just be underpinned by technology that can be used very effectively.